You've heard of IQ, you've heard of EQ, and today's guest, Amy Lynn Durham, is going to teach us about SQ. That's a type of spiritual intelligence, and anyone who is interested in servant-based leadership will be very fascinated to learn more about this topic. Amy is often referred to as the corporate mystic due to her unique ability of providing spiritual intelligence in order to energize and transform the workplace. I think we all could probably use that right about now. Listen in to hear more.
Welcome to the Leadership Coaching Group's podcast. I'm your host, Liz Howard, an entrepreneur, author, and executive leadership coach. This is where I introduce you to the top experts that discuss the burning topics that leaders at all levels need to know about. My goal is to help you become a leader that you are confident others will want to follow. So, subscribe to the show, listen in weekly, and watch your confidence as a leader grow.
Hello, Amy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to speaking to you about some, I think, kind of fresh and new topics. First and foremost, as we were chatting before we hit record, there was a big conversation a few years back, and it's still, I think, a very relevant one, about emotional intelligence. And I think we're all pretty bought into this concept of emotional intelligence. We've learned about it, we've discussed it, but you have a new lens to kind of look through the types of intelligences that we have. And you talk a lot about spiritual intelligence. So can you maybe begin by giving us a definition of this and tell us what is spiritual intelligence when it comes to the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So we all know about IQ, right? And we also heard a ton about EQ, like you said, emotional intelligence. Well, spiritual intelligence, SQ, my favorite definition is from Dana Zohar. She's a physicist, philosopher. She says it's an ability to access higher meanings, values, abiding purposes, and unconscious aspects of the self, and to embed these meanings, values, and purposes in living a richer and more creative life. So it helps you think out of the box. It helps you have humility, and it gives you an access to energies that come from something beyond your ego. And it comes from a perspective of you not just focusing on yourself and your day-to-day concerns. So once you can access that SQ, it sort of underpins IQ and EQ, and it moves you to that level where you're in a more collaborative space. And as I hope we all believe by now, collaboration over competition, I think, wins every time when we're trying to achieve a goal on a project or anything like that. So it's a really important tool, if you will, to access. Setting your ego aside. This is beyond just me and my day-to-day concerns. So, hey, I made a mistake. Hey, we have a problem that needs to be solved. I don't have all the answers, but let me have each person on my team bring me a couple proposed solutions. Those types of things show your team, your employees, that you are setting your ego aside for the greater good of whatever goal you're working on.
So say that people are like, yes, I know this is a thing. I've seen it. Maybe sometimes I've even felt it, but how on earth do I develop it? So if this is kind of talking about the higher values, accessing the higher self, how do you access that?
So for example, an activity that I do quite a bit is an intention setting activity where and you can do it on Zoom, or you can do it with a group in person, hopefully one day soon. And you can write on a little tissue paper your intentions for the coming quarter, for your life, whatever topic you want to bring up as a leader. And then what we do is we go around and share with each other what our intentions are. Maybe we pick 3. And the connections that you make with each other are really profound because, you work with someone day to day and you might not have gotten to know them at a deeper level. And once you hear them share something like that, it's really valuable because the team will come together and help each other out more when they see the other person as a regular human being like yourself.
Even when I'm talking about communication, forget about like accessing your higher self. I get this response of it's fluff, it's woo-woo, it's, fill in the blank. So how do you address those types of kind of blocks that some people might have to this stuff?
When you ask me that question, my first thought is to go to the data. So that, for example, there is a research study from Harvard Business Review that says lonelier workers perform more poorly, quit more often. They feel less satisfied with their jobs, costing upwards of $3.5 billion in the US alone. Right there, that's a huge profit loss for companies, for employees that feel lonely or disengaged, not connected. I would argue that doing a connecting activity like this would help solve that issue. And clearly, I've seen it firsthand, increase productivity and profitability. Because if you have someone that maybe isn't a fan of someone else on a team and you bring them together and you help them connect and see each other in a way that they haven't seen each other before, it's really powerful.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting. The past couple weeks, a lot of the people that I've had on the show have been talking about this idea of fun. And I think that it's really interesting that right now, when things are very serious in a lot of ways, from social perspectives and health perspectives, and in so many ways, that the people that are really thought leaders and considering how to make people, teams, organizations successful keep bringing up this topic of fun. And I wonder how that topic plays into avoiding burnout. Do you have anything to say about that?
Oh my gosh, 100%. So, I mean, just when the whole reason why I left my job in the corporate world was because I felt like my creativity was being crippled. So I planned to exit my position for about a year. And I wanted to make sure I left on top to prove that having fun, collaboration, and doing these fun activities actually worked. And they do. And you can dig into the data. There's a ton of data that supports it. But the fact that you can help somebody alleviate some of the stress in their day through laughter or through connecting is a really cool responsibility that you have as a leader that you can take advantage of. And I would say also, don't feel guilty about having fun during these times, right? Like maybe there's some pressure to feel like everyone has to be serious.
Right.
But let's remove that and enjoy the time that we have now, because we're not guaranteed tomorrow, as we know, right?
Right. And I think you really kind of touched on it when you were describing how you felt in your last corporate job. But how do you define burnout?
When you're feeling burnt out, it's when you're feeling fatigued all the time, when you're disengaged at work, you're feeling like you just don't have that spark anymore for the job. Now, I will add, if you are in a job for a really long time, you could go through those feelings and then bounce back, right? I have an exercise that I offer to clients that's called Dare to Dream. And you go through a visualization where you visualize your life if you never had to have a job. What would it look like? Let's say you had a ton of money in the bank. You never needed another paycheck again. What would you do with your life if that was the case? And you jot like 5 things down after you do kind of a 5-minute meditation visualization. What would I do with my life if I never had to work again? And then I challenge you to do a couple of those things now while you have your job. Towards the end, that's sort of the punchline, right? Because the reality is most people have to work. And we put aside pursuing personal goals that we think will fulfill us until next year. Or maybe, once I get to this dollar amount in my bank account. So I help people kind of through that to pull their goals into their personal goals into the present moment. And then also, if you're feeling burnt out at your job, you can also wake up every morning and just kind of ask yourself, how can I help today? If I'm a leader and I'm over it and I just don't want to do this anymore, but I know I'm going to be here for the next, few months until I transition. What legacy do I want to leave? What do I want to be remembered by? How do I want my employees and my team to feel? How can I help today? How can I help make things better? And I think that's, again, back to accessing SQ, low self-orientation, putting aside your day-to-day concerns and putting yourself in a space where you're putting your ego aside and you're helping. And it sort of shifts your energy into helping your day go by better and not feeling burnt out.
Right. And I think it's worth noting, although people are going to say, yeah, we know this, but I'm still going to say it anyway. I think to bolster that too, there are some really simple things like making sure you get enough sleep and drinking enough water and, making sure that you're putting yourself in a position where you don't have those like lower level needs so drained that it's hard to do anything else. I know I've suffered with that when I get too busy and too stressed and everything feels so important and it just feels like you're go, go, go. Then, anxiety builds up and then you don't sleep. And then maybe you have a second glass of wine, which messes up your sleep and increases your anxiety anyway. And then, all of the other things that play into that. So I think being mindful of the fact that, there are some basic things that you can do to help set yourself up maybe to better access that SQ and maybe maintain your practice of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it could be, what can you remove from your list, your to-do list? I need you to remove 3 things from your to-do list today because we get so overwhelmed. I know that because I've been there, that, your inbox can get so full that can be overwhelming, especially managing in a time of teams and in a time during COVID. Wow. Hats off to all of the leaders that are really handling that well, because that's not something that's easily done. But absolutely, getting sleep, drinking water, making sure you're eating healthy, those are all really great things to help you show up and be present for your team. I will say though, if you slip up, you shouldn't be coming from a place where if you make a mistake, you feel like you shatter or you feel like you failed. I call myself a recovering corporate workaholic and I slip up a lot and then I have to recognize, repair, and recover. I left my job to start my own business and I started my own brand, and that takes a lot of work. But the reason why I did that was because I wanted to have a healthy life all the way around. I didn't want my whole life to be just my work and my career. I wanted to have healthy relationships that were meaningful outside of the workplace. And so keep that in mind that, I caught myself working through lunch, telling a friend of mine, no, I can't do your online, yoga class during lunch because I have to keep working. And wow, I started doing that again. So I had to recognize, repair, and recover and not beat yourself up about it. But as long as we try to make it a daily practice, I think that that's the best that we can do.
I love that. Recognize, repair, and recover. That's really just sums it up so nicely. So Amy, if you had just one piece of advice to offer to a brand new leader, what might that be?
I love this question. I just paused because I'm thank you for asking me that. Have courage to connect and be vulnerable. Do something meaningful with your team. Even if it's for 5 minutes, have a question, look up, coaching questions and kick off a meeting with it. When was the last time you got goosebumps? Go around and have everyone share. What was the last random act of kindness you witnessed? Something cool and fun that everyone can share and connect with. That's one idea, right? But I'm offering easy tips for a new leader, and it would be just take that first step and just have the courage to be a little bit vulnerable and see what happens when you do. And really come from a place of serving your team rather than what your day-to-day concerns are.
So good. So good. So where can people go to learn more about you and your good work?
You can just go to my website. It's createmagicatwork.net.
Amy, thank you so much for coming on the show and for offering this fresh perspective and new way of thinking about how we can be better leaders. This has been really fun.
Thank you so much. I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, that is all for this week. Until next time, bye-bye.
Hey guys, if you're getting anything out of this show, please head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. I read every single one, and honestly, your feedback is single-handedly what keeps this show going. So go to iTunes and let us know you're listening. Thank you so much for being a part of our community.